Friday morning, March 4th, 1938. Sodden and battered, the Southland yesterday emerged from a near-record deluge and counted 67 known dead with scores missing. Receding rivers, which rampaged down upon the lowlands Wednesday, began giving up their victims yesterday, and rescuers feared that the total death list might near the 100 mark. Authorities, hampered by disrupted communications, progressed slowly in the search for bodies and check of property damage, believed to be tremendous. 47 identified bodies had been recovered at a late hour last night, and 20 others were unidentified. More than 3,700 storm refugees in Los Angeles and Orange counties were quartered by relief agencies in theaters, schools, public halls, and campsites. I'm Gary Bell. I am the History Room librarian here at the Placentia Library District. And we are starting a series of special programs about the history of our local community. The first one today is about the 1938 flood, which affected Placentia very dramatically. We hope this is the first in a series of programs relating to our local community history. The 1938 flood was a very devastating event for our community, and we have a guest here who has a first-hand knowledge of it, and he's going to recount his experiences as a 10-year-old boy during the 1938 flood in Placentia. Also here today is Pat Irett, one of our local historians, and our special guest is Eddie Castro, who was 10 years old at the time of the flood, and we're very happy that he's going to share with us his personal reminiscences of that catastrophic time.
Well, February and January of 1938, 20 inches of rain had already been recorded, and the grounds were really, really saturated, and this particular storm, it was very, very persistent, and it did not let up. And we lived on Gonzales Street, and our home was located on Gonzales Street, and when the water started to rise on the creek going from east to west, the waters were really, really rising fast. At this time, Chet Whitten, who was the principal of the La Jolla Elementary School, he came down the street with his pants rolled up and telling everybody in the community to move on to higher ground because there was a very big flood, a very imminent big flood coming on. So he was telling everybody to better get out before it would be too late. And Chet Whitten is pictured here in this picture that we have here, and Chet Whitten was the principal, and this picture was taken in front of the building that we were in at that time. And you can tell that it's 4 to 5 feet high, and my story will tell you later, I'll tell you why the water was so deep, because this is a reference of how high the water really got. Well, the water kept coming, and my mother and my dad, they didn't believe that we were going to have a flood because we had gone through this so many times before, and they were very, very skeptical. They figured, well, the water is not going to, we're not going to get a flood. Every year the water gets up high like that. But about 3 o'clock in the afternoon, the water kept rising and rising, so when Mr. Whitten came by here, he actually urged everybody, this is dead serious, you better move out. So my mother and dad got us all rounded up, and this are my brothers and sisters. These are my brothers and sisters. This is my oldest brother, my oldest sister, my twin brother, and I'm here, and my oldest sister here. This is my father, this is my mother, and this is my grandmother, who played a very big role in this flood. My dad figured, well, the water doesn't seem to be going down, so we better pay attention. So finally we all moved, and we walked on Gonzales Street, we walked on Gonzales Street up to La Jolla Road from going east. And we walked through here, and as we were walking over here, there was already some cars that had stalled on La Jolla Road. They were going in that direction, and they were stalled, and they were in the middle of the road. So we didn't pay too much attention to that, really. So
no one was in the cars?
No, that I know of, there was nobody in the cars.
Left them there.
They just abandoned them because they probably stalled. So then we moved on to the building, which was the elementary school here, and it was a brick building, and that brick building was 5 feet high from the ground level. And we moved into the classrooms, and I was very familiar with the area because I had started elementary school there in kindergarten in 1933. So the rooms were very, very familiar. So it was kind of like a fun thing. Everybody was laughing, and we were everybody was very joyful. But my mother and dad, they had this little thing in their head. They figured that this is kind of serious because why are the water keeps rising and rising? Well, as this happened when we moved out of the La Jolla on Gonzales Street, when we moved into the school, it was about 3 o'clock in the afternoon. When finally we made it to the school building, it was around maybe 4 o'clock, and the water kept rising and rising. It really was really getting bad. So everybody was all squared away. There was a lot of people in these classrooms. There was 6 classrooms in this building, and they were all elementary school classrooms. So when we went inside, I don't remember who said what to do, but the work tables that were there, they were 2 feet high for elementary level. And they set them up in a long length, and there was 2 rows. So when we got there, they told everybody, you are going to stand on the tabletops in case the water keeps coming up higher. So that was a plan for the adults. But the children, since they had closed closets all the way around in the room, they put us up on top of the closed closets. And it was a lot of fun. You know, we were sitting up here, we had our feet dangling, and everybody was kind of like making a lot of funny noises, you know. So here it is, it's getting later now, so it's getting to, the dusk is coming, and it starts to get dark, and Lord and behold, we found out that there was no electricity, so we were going to be pitch black. So as time went on, the water started coming up higher and higher. Pretty soon, the water was lapping on the level of the building, and that was already 4 feet high, so 4 to 5 feet high. So when it got real dark, maybe it was probably later at maybe 7 or 8 o'clock at night, some of the people that had moved there, they had brought candles with them. So they passed some candles throughout I know that they passed them throughout the other classrooms, but we had 2 candles in that room. So when they lit the candles, you know, it was hard to believe that how much water was in the classroom already. So everybody was standing on the tabletops. So later on, as time went by, the water kept rising and rising and rising, and the time was getting already late. And by this time, my grandmother, who I previously showed you a picture of, she started saying the rosary. A lot of other people joined in, and it was very solemn. And us kids, as we were up high on top of the shelves, on the closet shelves, we could see down that everybody was really very, very solemn, and the seriousness of the water rising kept getting bigger and bigger because they were already standing in water on top of tables.
What was the attitude of the adults during this time?
And you just realize, you just picture yourself standing on top of a table like that for an amount of time. Pretty soon you start wobbling, and with the roar and the sound, and have your children in there with you. It's very traumatic. And I didn't realize this until after I was older, that imagine what they went through.
So I take it no one slept that night of the flood?
No, nobody. No, I'm sure nobody did. My dad and other men, they were talking about going upstairs.
You thought at the time that you might have been forced to go all the way to the roof?
Yeah, absolutely, yes, because the sound was a constant roar like a train going by, really loud, and the banging and the screeches and the breaking and that everything that goes along with a flood water is going through a community like that. Parallels. I am assuming it was around midnight. Then the crashes, the bangings, the screeches, the breaking, you could hear that. And you wonder, well, what's going on? And actually what it was happening was that some of the homes were being swept away, and the debris and buildings, homes being torn apart, that was a noise that we could hear, plus the roar of the river. So we thought it was a river then because there was so much water just going through there. So actually, I don't believe anybody slept. Since we had left our house at about 3 o'clock in the afternoon, we had been awake. We had been awake and we had come into school, so everybody was really, really lively. And so we passed the night with wondering what was going to happen. And of course, they had talked about opening up the ceiling, crawl halls, because if there's something like this was going to happen, we would have to go up into the attic next.
If the water got any higher.
Yeah, if the water was going to get any higher, people would have to move up. And the only place they could move then would be in the attic and probably the roof of the building. And I'm sure that they thought, how were they going to do it? But, you know, when a situation like this arises, there's always ways of finding how to get up higher. Well, as dawn came, and it was cold, we were wet, and we didn't realize this until morning, that the water had left a lot of mud, and the water has started receding already. In other words, the water has already left its damage, and there was a lot of mud in the classroom, and it was really sad to see so much damage done by this water that had been there at nighttime. And the water started receding, and we went out into the porch because the water was already lapping just the edges of the porch, and there was pipe railings on there. So we were looking at that, and there you can see the pipe railing, and you can see the level of the height of this. And the water was, when we were up there, came out of the room, we were leaning on these pipes, and we were probably up on top of the two pipes here, and there was still a little bit of water there, but the water was going down. And you didn't see it like it's going down, the water going down fast in a sink or anything like that. It was kind of just slowly going down. And when we walked onto the porch, and we came out into the area right here, and we were looking in this direction, and saw all the damage that was done overnight. Our homes, the homes of our friends, people that we knew, right on, which is Blue Gum Street. You could see all the damage that was done. And it was really, really sad to see, because we knew the people that lived there, and it was really a sad thing. So something started already. As young as I was, at 10 years old, I realized that there was a lot of damage, and what was happening the night before when we heard the crash, the booms, the screeches, and the sound of that roaring train going by. It was really, really rough, you know.
Eddie, just for a moment here, Blue Gum Street is now known as Melrose.
Yes. And Melrose ran all the way up to Orange Thorpe here. After the water started receding, it was receding quite fast, and the people decided that everybody was really, really hungry by this time.
The store owners were probably with you in the La Jolla School Refuge.
Yes, that's why that was a break that we got there, because the owners, they volunteered. They figured, well, we will walk down La Jolla Road, go to our stores, and see what we can salvage to bring back so we could eat. My dad was one of the volunteers that went with this party, and they came back and they had boxes and they had bags full of we called it bologna, but it was actually it was minced ham, and there's bologna, but we used to call it bologna. And they had some bread that was not damaged. They had canned goods, and so did the other store, Mr. Tafoya. They brought also some goods that were not damaged. They took them to the schools where we were at, and they dispersed them around all the people in all the classrooms. And you know, for us, it was a big party because we were getting free food. And here we are having a party in our own school. And we stayed there overnight in our classrooms. And that was very, very nice.
That was a whole different school experience.
Yes. So here we are.
Hungry, weren't you?
Oh, yeah, you know, and everybody was just having a great, great time. Everybody is wondering what is going to happen. So I don't know who came by and told us that it was safe to leave. But about 3 o'clock in the afternoon, the same time that we had left our home on Gonzalez Street, well, now we are returning back to ruins.
24 hours later.
24 hours later, we're returning to ruins. And, you know, when we were walking out of the schoolhouse, my mother and dad, they were in front of us, and we were walking barefooted. And, you know, when you go to the beach, you see the little tide pools that form when water comes up, and then the water goes down, and it leaves a little tide pool. We had those on La Jolla Road, and we were kicking the water out and mud, and we were, as children, we were picking up sticks and throwing them, and my mother was saying, well, you guys behave, you know, it's okay, all right. But when we came out of school, and we came from the schoolhouse here, and we walked back to La Jolla Road, the first street that we saw was Tafoya Street. And wow, we saw damage on Tafoya Street. You could not see this way because all the homes and debris was piled up in the middle of the street. And you know, when we saw that, we figured, wow, I wonder what it's going to be like when we get to our street, which was the next street, Gonzalez Street. Well, we continued on walking, but meantime, as we were walking, you remember I told you that there was cars that stalled on La Jolla Road and they were in the middle of the road? Whoa, when we were coming out of there now, the cars were on the side of the road and they were all leaning and full of mud, and they were pushed out of the road. So now we're walking on La Jolla Road, we're walking to Gonzalez Street. And we walked to Gonzalez Street, and boy, oh boy, it is really something. Our house is located on Gonzalez Street and is located on the west side of the street. Well, when we looked down La Jolla Road, from La Jolla Road to Gonzalez Street, you just can't imagine the damage we saw. I have a picture here that gives you an idea that the Venegas family were our neighbors. And our Venegas family, they also stayed there at the schoolhouse. But you know, when I was there, and I can remember now, I did not see any of my cousins. They were my cousins. The Venegas, they were my cousins. And they were our next door neighbors. And you know, up to this day, I don't remember ever seeing nobody other than my family. I saw my mother, I can still see my mother, my dad, my grandmother, my brothers and sisters. I can see them, but I cannot see nobody else. Why? I do not know. But this is the type of damage that you saw. This is my cousin Teresa Venegas, and this is Rafael Aranda. They lived on Gonzalez Street, and this is what they saw when they also came back to Gonzalez Street.
My goodness.
And you can see the damage that they encountered. As we approached our home after leaving the schoolhouse, and we saw the damage in the street on Gonzalez Street, it was really, really sad. So sad that we figured, gee, gads, what is left? So that was really, really traumatic, very sad moment, because my mother and dad, when they saw the front door, or part of the front door and part of the back door wide open, and there was mud in there, and it was just covered with mud. And the first thing, the most important, probably the most traumatic thing that we saw was my sister Lupe. She was the oldest. She was taking piano lessons, and my dad had bought her an upright piano, and we looked and we kind of crawled into the house. The piano was laying flat on its face. Everything in the house was gone, pots and pans and books and papers and all some important papers that my mother and dad had, records of whatever, they were lost. And it's really, really sad. But there was a lot of people walking around, and it was about 3 o'clock, 3:30 in the afternoon, and there was a lot of people walking around also looking for some of the things that they had lost, and everybody was in the same boat. So, you figure, well, we lost this, and you make a big thing out of it. No, it was everybody had lost everything, practically everything. We left with what we had in our bags, and that's what we came with. And it's really sad. And my grandmother and my mother, they had chickens, and my grandmother had a goat, and it was a pet goat, and the name of the goat was Sancha. And we had a pig, and the pig and the goat were lost. But about 3 days later, somebody came back and they said that they had found our pig, and they brought it back.
What about other buildings in town? The destruction of some of the other buildings. Are you aware of any other buildings that were that required a lot of cleanup afterwards?
Of course, one building for sure had to be cleaned out, and cleaned out and push all the mud out of the building. The school, the La Jolla Elementary School, all the classrooms were full of mud. They had at least a foot of mud inside of them, and that's a lot of mud. And then down La Jolla Road, our little church, which was the Virgen de Guadalupe Church, which is sitting on La Jolla Road, right between Vista and Simmons Street, that was just loaded with mud. It didn't have any other damage, like say the building was moved or anything, but God, it was full of just mud, and there was a lot of people helping to clean the church out, and they removed all the pews, and then they pushed all the mud out into the street.
Eddie, did your family own an automobile? And if so, what happened to it?
Yeah, my dad had a 1928 Dodge 4-door, and it was really it would probably be an antique that you see in a museum nowadays if you see one of those cars. And it didn't get pushed out from its location. It was parked in the back of the house, but it received a lot of water damage. And later on, after my dad, we got established at the Rancho Santa Ana, where we were living. After that, they had it hauled to the Rancho Santa Ana, and he worked on the engine. They took it all apart. They cleaned all the inside, and he restored the car back to its original condition.
Amazing.
Yes, it is amazing. Now we're talking about what's going to happen next. Well, by this time the water had receded quite a bit, and trucks came over from the city of Placentia, and they probably, the packing house people that were in town, they sent some flatbed trucks, and they loaded all the people, and they took them to the city of Placentia, downtown. So the reason why I say the city of Placentia, because where we lived in a colony, and it was unincorporated area, and it didn't belong to the city of Placentia. It was the community that was, our mailing address was Route 3, Anaheim, and we were, our police protection was the Orange County Sheriff, and they were the one that gave us police protection, and fire protection was, we don't know because we never had any fires there that I know of. So the city of Placentia was really, really nice. They sent these trucks over there, and they loaded us up, and they took us to the American Legion, which was located on Chapin Avenue and Murray Street. And here is the American Legion. And the American Legion post was located, right where the Dolphin Fountain is located now, in Kramer Park. That's where they took us. And they took us down there, and we were hungry. And they had beds for us. They had army cots. They had army cots for us. And nobody had experienced ever sleeping on army cots. And we wondered where nobody had really paid too much attention to that, but it was quite different than a bed. And they fed us. They had a basement, and they had a kitchen downstairs, and they fed us really well. And then they took us upstairs, and you could sleep downstairs or you could sleep upstairs. And our family decided to sleep upstairs. And we had a lot of fun. We as kids, we enjoyed the whole thing. And the next day, the Placentia School District sent school buses, and they put us in the school bus, and they took us to Valencia High School, and we took a bath. And they had, the showers were open, and the men went in first, and the kids didn't want to take showers with their dad, and so we decided to wait until they got their showers, and then we went in and we had our big fun. And then they took us back again on the buses. They took us to the American Legion, and they fed us, and they tucked us into bed, and the next morning they took us to a tent city in the La Jolla area. And this tent city was located on Cypress Street. And Cypress Street would be the last street of the La Jolla area. We had Blue Gum, Tafoya, Gonzalez, Simmons Street, Vista, and Cypress Street. And this here was a big empty field in this area here. I would say maybe 2 or 3 acres. And we used to call it La Papa, which means the potato field. And the potato field served the purpose of, they dragged this out and they leveled it out pretty well, really fast, and they set up army type of tents. And
Those would be big ones.
Yes, they were, Pat. The big tents, and they were about maybe 20 by 20. And they had a little stove in the middle with the chimney going up in the center. And right here they set, I don't remember exactly how many rows there were, but there were rows in this direction, opposite of the streets. There were rows like this. And in this area, they had moved all the people that had gone to the American Legion in Placentia, and they had brought them back, and they placed us in this area, in the tent area. And they had field kitchens, they had field restrooms, They had a truck with water, and also had places like a little area here. They set up a special tent where you would communicate with the Red Cross people, and they had clothes, and they had other things that people needed. Clothes was the major thing that we needed because we didn't have nothing. I understand that we went to the American Legion and there was some clothes issued out over there, but I don't remember that. What I do remember the ones over here at Camp. Well, we were here for 5 days, and my father was an employee of the Rancho Santa Ana Botanical Garden. And the Rancho Santa Ana Botanical Garden is located in Yorba Linda. It's at the end of Esperanza Road and at the end of La Palma Road today. And today there's a big, beautiful home there. But when my dad worked there, there was 6,500 acres of citrus trees, apples, walnuts, almonds, and a little bit of dry farming, which was hay and barley. But when the superintendent of the ranch, which was Ernest Johnson, my dad had been working there since 1931. So he was a valued employee. So they offered him a place to stay. And so my dad took the opportunity to have a place for us. So we all moved. About 5 days after the flood, we moved in. Since the flood occurred on March the 3rd, and the flood was over on March the 4th, by the middle of the end of the couple of, maybe a week or so later, we moved to the Rancho Santa Ana, and the Red Cross gave my mother, they gave us pots and pans, and you know, they gave us a sack of beans, they gave us a sack of flour, and and it was really, really neat. Everybody helped a lot. And there was a very small apartment place that we had, but you know, we were used to living in small quarters, so one kitchen, one bedroom, one bathroom, and a porch. And you know, we all found a place to sleep, and it was very comfortable.
Now this was your mother and father?
Yes.
And your
3 brothers and 2 sisters.
But your grandmother didn't move in with you.
And my grandmother stayed at the tent city, and when the house our Red Cross came in, and how important it is that the Red Cross came over, and they made contact with my dad, and there was 3 vendors, house movers, and they all gave a bid, and they told my dad what it would cost. My dad told the Red Cross how much it would cost. They gave him a check. He presented it to the Red Cross, the house movers, and they in turn moved our home to its original location. As damaged as it was, and they made some repairs, as broken down and everything, that part or the whole house was moved to the original position on Gonzales Street.
Eddie, could you describe for me what it was like living on Gonzales Street in La Jolla prior to the flood?
Well, you know, the colony, as it was known there, the word barrio, this is a modern word now, but the colony was a very, very close-knit community. On these streets, Blue Gum, Tafoya, Gonzales, Simmons, Vista, and Cypress Street, everybody was very, very peaceful, and the people was like a big, giant family. And you know, there was probably about 12 lots, about 12 lots in every side of the street. So you figured if you're talking about maybe close to 120 homes.
Okay.
So if you had 120 homes, there was maybe the population of community was probably around over 300 people. So everybody was really, really close. There was no problems. There was never any, as far as I can remember as a youngster, the police were never present there. There was never any police action of any kind there. And it was a very, very well-knitted community. And even, like for example, they brought us more together, like when I talk about that the owners of the stores actually donated their food for the people that were stranded in the school building. And that really, really knitted the whole community together, and it brought everybody together because they were willing to give to the people what we had given to them, which was the business of the community. So it was a very gentle and peaceful community.
May I ask a follow-up question?
Sure.
When this was sort of at the end of the Depression time, where did most of the folks work who lived within
Well,
the community?
you're talking about the end of the Depression time? Well, it might have been the end of the Depression time for a lot of other people, but certainly it wasn't at the end of the Depression for the La Jolla community, because all these people were working. They worked in the fields. They worked as orange pickers in the tremendous amount of acreage of oranges that was surrounding the area. They worked in the packing houses. They worked in picking oranges. They worked in construction, building maybe ditches. Like for example, my father, he got to work digging the canal from Green River all the way to Yerba Linda. So we didn't feel the difference of getting out of the Depression until the War II came on. So,
I think that was true for a lot of people.
yeah. The people that lived on Cypress Street, they were the Retanas. Their home was just about right here near La Jolla Road, and two children, I'm sorry, it was three. Two children and the mother were lost in that flood. And according to the records show that there was approximately 20, some people 29, they have different figures. But we knew that from the Atwood area, which was hard hit by this big flood, there was 12 people lost.
Eddie, you referred a moment ago to the number of people who perished in the flood. How many people do you actually know of in the Atwood, La Jolla district that died during the flood? Because I know newspaper accounts vary. Here's an account from the OC Weekly of September of 2005 that says historians have long argued about the total number of dead in the 38 flood. Some reports had said 58, some lowered it to 21. The last victim, Ildefonso Agundez, was discovered a month after the flood. So no one really knows. One Placentia resident has said that he remembers many single male Mexican immigrants lived alongside the Santa Ana riverbanks, and they just disappeared. No one ever asked for them. So I just wondered what would your count be of the number of dead from the 38 flood?
After the flood and during the flood, there was a lot of numbers being thrown around. And I didn't pay too much attention to the number because we really didn't know that many people. The only people that we knew was in the La Jolla colony or the La Jolla area. But later on in my life, you get more information from different people, and we came up to this number of 12, and 12 people from the Atwood to the La Jolla colony. So, they could be more or less less. But that was a number that we kind of concluded on.
Well, one of the articles that I had read talked about a lot of the migrant workers who lived along the riverbanks there, and it said that maybe since they didn't know exactly who those people were, many of the single male Mexican immigrants that lived there just disappeared, and no one ever asked about them, so no one would really know. Do you think that could be?
That's very, very true because when we were young, and my dad used to take us in as early as 1933, 1934. They used to take us to the park, which used to call it Sycamore Flats, and now is known as Featherly Park. It's a regional park. And at that time, there was a lot of people camped out there, and there's a lot of, and the water was really flowing really gentle through that area, and it was really, really beautiful. I can remember very clearly. We have a picture as youngsters sitting in the river, and that's actually it was. It had a sandy foundation, and it was really, really pretty. So there's, as far as people living or getting wiped out, it's very, very possible that happened.
According to the LA Times of January of 2005, it says one of the single biggest death tolls came in the Mexican-American settlement of Atwood in Orange County, which was swept away by an 8-foot wall of water. 43 perished.
Well, yeah, well, there again, we're talking about numbers, and I don't see how we could have had 43 people out of the Atwood area, and it doesn't quite, it's a little exaggerated. And it's an exaggerated figure, and I think I would have to say that I'm not in agreement with that 43.
Eddie, what in the world happened? How did all this water get into your area, into the La Jolla area, and other places in our city were safe? Other communities, however, like Atwood, were just submerged. As you got older, did you find the answer to this question?
Well, you know that the river, the Santa Ana River, was really, really flowing real hard. And the beginning of the breakthrough was on Imperial Highway and Esperanza Road. Imperial Highway was actually, there was a big bridge there, and it created like a dam because a lot of the debris was getting caught in the under the bridge, and it was diverting the water north instead of going south.
Right.
So then they came up down towards the Atwood area, and there was a railroad trestle on Jefferson Street and Orangethorpe. And that trestle was a wooden bridge, and it tilted over, and when that tilted over, it created a natural dam, and it diverted all the water towards the Atwood area, and that's where it caused a big amount of damage, because the water, instead of going south, it came in northwest, and that's what really created.
Atwood to be submerged. Then.
Had caused. They claim it didn't. They claim it didn't. But after talking to a lot of people later in my life, that's what they said, that caused a lot of damage because the water got diverted towards the Atwood area.
We had Hurricane Katrina a while back. Do you see any similarities or parallels between that devastating event and the 1938 flood that you lived through?
Oh, absolutely. You know, when I saw the disaster and the Katrina, I guess what do you call it, the hurricane or the Katrina flooding or the Louisiana water flooding, it brought back a lot of memories, and and I could, the suffering that the people were going through, it brought back a lot of memories of how it was for us that we went through something like that, and that was a long time ago.
Well, thank you, Eddie, for sharing your story with us. It was a vivid account of a 10-year-old boy's experience during a catastrophic event, and we really appreciate you coming and sharing it with us today. Thank you.
Thank you, Gary Bell.
Mi amigo, muchas gracias.
I just want to say that the flood of 1938 ended on March the 4th, and there was a lot of sadness. I feel very, very fortunate that we survived, Chet Whitten played a major part in saving a lot of lives in this area, because when he came over knocking on doors telling people to leave, if they had not left and the school had not been open on Blue Gum Street, many people would have lost their lives. That includes our family, and that includes me. And very, very thankful to be here to tell my story, and that concludes my experience.
You have just heard the stark memories of Eddie Castro, who as a 9-year-old boy suffered through the tragedy of the 1938 flood, which destroyed neighborhoods and uprooted families. We are grateful to Mr. Castro for this vivid first-hand account. Throughout time, it was normal for the rivers in the area to overflow their banks in the spring, when the mountain snows melted and the water rushed into the riverbeds. At the time of the 1938 flood, construction of the Prado Dam, which would control the water reaching the rivers, was in the planning stage. In recent years, we have been protected from floodwaters by the Prado Dam, a portion of which can be seen from the 91 freeway east of Yorba Linda. Throughout our city, flood control channels can be seen. They have been constructed to contain the flow of water. Using the current knowledge of engineers, government continues to seek ways, paid for by our taxes, to protect us from the suffering and devastation which occurred in the flood conditions of 1938.